Hello, everyone, and welcome back to The Happening. My name is George Shaft, and I've got quite the show for you today. I've got British politics, basically all of it. There's a whole bunch of different stuff happening. I'm going to talk about as much as I can. I'm going to be talking about Germany, the German elections, which we talked about last week, but now we have the full results and some speculations as to where that's go. And finally, I've got the United States with some problems with the debt. But let's go and, without skipping a beat, head straight to our first subject, which is not really going to be one subject in this whole segment. It's going to be a whole different bunch of them. Britain's been a bit of a, how should I put this? A bit of a parody over the past couple of days, has it not? Last week I sat here and I talked about the fact that the United Kingdom was suffering from two big, terrible ailments, Brexit and bad government, as there were shortages in supermarkets and there was a fuel crisis. Well, 1 week later, and the fuel crisis is still looking very strong. I've got Sky News up at the moment, titled Fuel Supply Crisis, UK Government Map Reveals Regional Differences in Petrol Supply. And the map, ironically, uses actually the European Union Parliament divisions, of Britain, which I think are quite good, and I wish we used them more. But anyway, last week, it was just basically all red. Like, we all had huge problems. Now, though, don't worry, it's only the southeast, London, the east of England, and the East Midlands that are in the red. Everything else is now in the yellow, with Northern Ireland being a glorious green of having more than enough supplies. Probably to do with the fact that they have no problem importing them from, the rest of Ireland to, fill up the petrol stations. Now, this story has been something that because I'm not affected really, I've been quite enjoying. The reactions online have been every bit as glorious, and I've not found a single reaction I didn't like online. There was the man who was riding a horse, past a massive line at a petrol station, just singing, "I'm on a horse, I'm on a horse. He doesn't need petrol because I'm on a horse," which was funny. To the fact that sort of the very kind of Brexity people, the people who voted for a lot of these problems, very loudly and in full capital letters insisting that this had nothing to do with Brexit. To give them credit, they linked to a whole bunch of different things, which are also true. There's been a huge problem with getting HGV drivers for years now. They're badly paid, badly treated, antisocial hours. There's been also talk about, actually in other European countries, they've got some problems as well with getting people to drive these lorries. Yeah, I get that. And I also think that if anything ever came down to just one factor, we wouldn't have historians. It's when you look at a historical event, anybody who comes and says, "Oh," the classic one in my mind is, "Oh, why did the Roman Empire fall?" Anybody who comes and says the Roman Empire fell because of this one thing is a charlatan and he should run away. But it is definitely going to be true that there are multiple factors that are hitting this crisis in the UK, and some of them are political and are going to be controversial, such as, like I said last week, bad government. And this is one that the public seems to agree with me on. According to polling in the London Economic, it says that, which I will get to in more broad detail, it says, quote, "Over 2/3, 69%, think the government has responded badly to the HGV drivers, including over half of 2019 Conservative voters. Furthermore, 63% say they have been directly impacted by the HGV driver shortage, although only 12% say it's had a big impact. So clearly someone somewhere seems to be noticing that we uniquely among European countries seem to be having a problem with getting drivers to fill up our supermarket shelves and filling up our petrol stations. And don't say, oh, but Germany's got problems too, because if they were having comparable problems, you'd have no issue sending me pictures. Because this week I've been really engaging, I should point out, with sort of critics on this. There'd be no problems with sending pictures of, oh, here's an empty supermarket in Germany. But those don't exist because they're not having such a big problem with getting drivers. Maybe something to do with the fact they didn't make it harder to be someone who drives imports or exports of the nation with a hard border. Just possibly. That might have a little something to do with it. But don't worry. Anybody who's very nostalgia sort of thinking will have lots and lots of opportunities to indulge that nostalgia this week in British politics, including the fuel shortage itself. I vaguely remembered and sat and wondered, wasn't there like a thing that happened with fuel like a while ago? It turns out, yes, there was. I've got the Evening Standard up for this, and it was titled, "The 2000 Fuel Crisis is No Guide to 2021. All right. Now, this was actually a comment, but since it was published, I generally think that, I like the comment section in newspapers. They tend to take the best or the most surprising comments I've sent to them and put them out. This person said that back in September 2000, during the fuel crisis, a poll found that 78% of respondents said they supported the protesters' actions. But less surprisingly, that figure fell to 36% if essential services were being directly affected, which is a bit like being strongly in favor of the consumption of cake, but against the consequences of getting fat. That crisis eased fairly rapidly as public opinion turned sharply. In his memoirs, Tony Blair describes that part of government strategy was to deprive the protesters of the moral high ground by drawing attention to the impact of the NHS. Now, for anybody who's a bit sort of confused as to what this is, let me lay it all out. In the year 2000, there was an environmental protest against various sort of government policies, do something about the climate. And they went to sort of the main fuel supply depot in the UK and just blocked it. Just protesters there. Nobody could get in. Now, this lasted for a week and had very fast, very serious consequences on the UK's ability to function. We saw, like nowadays, big lines at petrol stations as the supplies ran out. We saw, like there were this week, stories of ambulances and police cars not being fueled enough to do what they need to do. This one, to even give us the flavor of 2000, there even was this week a protest. It was on the M25 instead. But they were environmentalists, so that's close enough, right? Tony Blair responded by going, hey, look at these bad protesters who are, making sure that ambulances can't get petrol. This time round, you have a government that goes, oh, don't worry, we have the solution to this. The army. That's right. As the Mirror has got here, petrol supply in southeast England critical, with army to deliver fuel tomorrow. That was an article from this morning. Petrol shortages are a critical level in London and the southeast of England, where many forecourts are without fuel, said retailers. The Petrol Retailers Association has said that there has been a notable improvement overall around the country, but their survey of 1,000 petrol stations still found that 16% have no fuel. But don't worry, army drivers are to join the effort to refuel petrol stations from tomorrow, and the PRA are calling for them to target the southeast of England after a chronic week of shortages that has resulted in panic buying and drivers hoarding fuel in water bottles. But don't worry, if you thought, fuel crisis, big long lines at the petrol station, and that's maybe that's a bit, that's not really enough, the year 2000, for me today in British politics. I want something a bit more, a bit more pizzazz, a bit more, in the rhetoric. Well, don't worry, because this week also saw the Labour Party conference. Now, I wasn't able to show up to this, even though I actually really wanted to. I forgot to get the tickets, and then when I tried to get them, it was too late, even though I was over a month ahead of time, which was annoying. But at the conference, it was interesting. The motion that I would have actually come to support and come to vote for got voted down. It was a motion to adopt proportional representation as a policy. Shame it was beaten by the unions, but does have remind us of the year 2000. Tony Blair in 1997 did, after all, have some wishy-washy. Maybe we should do some PR thing. Yeah, that might be good. Then he won power and with a giant majority, and kind of forgot about that. The other one that was much more like the year 2000 was, of course, the rule changes. Keir Starmer got voted through some changes in how sort of delegates and people get selected within the Labour Party, most notably how you get selected to be kind of like a candidate to be leader of the Labour Party, which everyone transparently saw as a way to sort of sideline the sort of the militant lefties, the Jeremy Corbyns of the party, the uber socialists and people who unironically called each other comrade. Which, for anybody nostalgic for the year 2000, for the Tony Blair years, watching the sort of right of the party smacking down on the left, there it is. There's your nostalgia face. It even came complete with a 2000s or 1990s-esque, meaningless, ridiculous social policy argument. After Rosie Duffield, the Labour MP for Canterbury, said a controversial statement that upset trans people, and there was what could best be called an absolute mess, which was really disappointing because it meant that the Labour Party ended up arguing about trans rights while there's a massive fuel shortage outside. Not a good look, let's be real. But hey, British politics then and now. The more things change, the more they stay the same. It's been 20 years since the year 2000, 21 years, really. And yet, it's all the same, isn't it? We've got sort of the right wing of the Labour Party is in charge and is dedicating all their efforts to smacking down the left of it. There's a fuel shortage, there's an incompetent government, and the people are ambivalent about it. But don't worry, the government's polling went up this week. But what do you think? I always make a point of reading the comments. I like reading comments. I like getting into arguments. This week, actually, I sort of decided to join in on some battles in the comment sections of Relax Radio posts because sometimes I just like a bit of a clash of ideas, a bit of a clash online. But you don't get a clash of ideas unless there are also other people that exist, because my ideas are not the only ideas that exist. I mean, much as I'd like them to, they're not. So here's some other people, and I'll catch you all again very, very soon.
We've seen it, right? If an owner of a large public traded company does something wrong, irrelevant of what that company does or how valuable that company is, the stock generally falls into a pool of nothing, right? Because in a public company where the stock is traded openly on the stock exchange, the value of that stock is driven by supply and demand, it's driven by emotion, it's driven by news, it's driven by quite a lot of variables over and above the actual accounting or total net worth of that company. I mean, we've seen it, right? If an owner of a large public traded company does something wrong, irrelevant of what that company does or how valuable that company is, the stock generally falls into a pool of nothing, right? And the company may still have value and may still be doing quite a good things.
Hello everyone and welcome back to The Happening. My name is George Shaft and I've just talked about British politics and how it's been the return of the year 2000 with all of the zombies coming back out wearing, I guess, the flamed shirts from those days. Let's start with something really depressing that is just breaking news during the break. I had a look to see what it was. It was this delightful thing. News for All, Twitter, new. It has been revealed that at least 26 Met colleagues of Wayne Couzens, this was the police officer who murdered Sarah Everard, whose trial was this week, have committed sex crimes, including rape, possessing indecent images of children, and voyeurism in the past 5 years. Hooray, the police are all full of horrible, nasty, evil people. So let's go for a much more positive thing, the German elections. So this last week I came and sat and I talked about, different kinds of coalitions that could be possible and what the what the German elections were looking like. But that was while people were voting. the voting was happening right then. Anything is possible. Now it's been a week. We have the results in. I've got Bloomberg up for this with the live results. And the results were this. Olaf Scholz of the Social Democrats won the most seats in the Bundestag. This is the first time it's happened in an eternity. The SDP, the Social Democrats, won 206 seats with 25.7% of the vote, of the second votes. The CDU, or the CSU, these are the Conservatives, the Christian Democrats, led by Armin Laschet, after their shocking, terrible performance and terrible campaign, won only 24% of the second round votes and got 196 seats. Third place was the Greens. They got 118 seats, which is a good result for the Greens. Happy to see that. The FDP, basically the Liberal Democrats, the Free Democratic Party, won 92 seats. The Alternative for Deutschland, the sort of far right goons, basically, won 83 seats, almost all of them actually in one region of Germany, Saxony, which has really fascinated me, that one, because it's basically the first time there's been a serious break in the sort of the old lines of East and West Germany. Though not completely. Those lines are still extremely strong to see in the result of the last party here, the left party, Die Linke, with 39 seats. There was one other party that won a seat. It was like a homeowners association, basically. They had one person elected. Well, let's start in reverse order, going back up. Die Linke, the left party, was a very controversial and very big factor in the German elections this year. Armin Laschet, the conservative candidate, repeatedly scaremongered during the election that Germans might end up being subjected to a coalition with Die Linke, with the left party, in government. He kept repeatedly saying that, Olaf Scholz, the Social Democrat, might ally with the left, and in what was sort of typically called the left coalition, and then you'd be subjected to these radicals who want to withdraw from NATO and want to have friendly relations with Russia. Spooky. Well, that's not going to happen. With only 39 seats, there's no sane coalition that exists that includes the left party, or needs the left party, rather. So they are very solidly out of power. Now, I know that last week I came here and I said that kind of a more left-wing Germany would be a welcome thing in European politics. But yeah, no, I've got my red lines, and NATO membership, not being too friendly with the oligarchy in decline, being aggressive in the East. Yeah, those are some pretty solid red lines to me. So I'm glad to see them do as badly as they did. The AfD has been fascinating these past couple of elections. For those who don't know, the AfD started as basically a bunch of university professors who one day woke up and decided, we don't like the euro. 2 years later, the events, dear boy events, took hold, and there was this thing you might remember. It was called the refugee crisis, 2015. Several million refugees, mostly from the Middle East, coming from places like Syria, Iraq, but also some terrible autocracies like Eritrea, all coming into Europe. You might remember it was a big deal. Yeah, the AfD were the ones who then made the big point of standing going, no, we're the ones in favor of getting, I don't know, machine gunning the refugees, I guess, and keeping them out. Which nationally in Germany hasn't been that popular, but for some reason has been very, very popular in one region, which is Saxony. If you see Germany on the map, you think of it, it's the province that's to the southeast, but to the north of the Czech Republic. It's got cities in it like Dresden and Wittenberg in it. This province has really embraced the AfD and is very much now. In fact, the AfD was the most popular province in that region. And when you look at the German election result map, you see that, and it always used to be completely dominated by red and black, black being the CSU and or CDU, and red being the SDP, the Social Democrats. But now this time it's actually very different, because you see, there's lots of red, lots of black, but then there's also the blue of the AfD dominating in Saxony. There's also like little islands here and there of yellow and green, but we'll get to those later. This one, it really makes me think, because back in 2015, the argument was always for these kind of nationalists that they're extremists, they are they're wrong on everything, they should be sort of excluded. And these guys are excluded basically from power too. There's no serious thought of them being in coalition at all. But with such a strong stronghold, and with the potential to expand out more, I don't know. It might be seen as legitimate one day. And if they did end up doing so, and if they did end up spreading out there, European politics might take a nasty turn. Though, luckily, the nasty turn is probably a bit unlikely this time around. The FDP and the Greens, there's not that much to say. They did fairly well for what they are. They picked up lots of votes in cities, which is not a huge surprise. So let's get to the big two now. There are only really two serious contenders to become the next Chancellor of Germany. One of them is Armin Laschet. He is the successor in the same party of Angela Merkel, who was in charge of Germany as the Chancellor since 2005, which is actually incredible. I was looking at a chart this week of all the different rulers of other countries that are around during Merkel's term. Merkel was the Chancellor while Italy went through 8 prime ministers. Japan also went through 8 prime ministers. It was madness just to think that, as Chancellor, she met so many different leaders, just being around, just staying. Armin Laschet, I don't think, though, has got a very good chance of being that person. Not only is he ideologically further away from the Greens and the FDP than the Socialists are now, but also he just ran a bad campaign with a party that was completely out of ideas. After 15 years of Angela Merkel being the Chancellor, the party generally was just the Merkel fan club. And then when Merkel wasn't there was just kind of like, oh yeah, we're going to carry forth the legacy. We're going to make new things. It was a weird paradox, because Laschet would go on and he'd say, oh, we're going to be super radical. We're going to change everything. But then the party would be like, yeah, we're going to honor Angela Merkel's legacy of not being radical by being really radical. It just didn't work. It was so bad, in fact, that Angela Merkel's own home constituency voted for the Social Democrats, who now look set to be the new kings of Germany. Olaf Scholz ran on a campaign of, hey, I'm a safe pair of hands, I'm really competent, I was a finance minister, and how exciting a finance minister is? Very boring, so I must be the best person to be in charge, super competent, was in government with Angela Merkel in coalition. So come on, vote for me. So it seems pretty predetermined what's going to happen in terms of coalition building. The Social Democrats are going to negotiate with the Greens and the Free Democrats, or Lib Dems, to create what they call a traffic light coalition of red, green, and yellow to negotiate themselves, into a government that hopefully, and I believe, would really like to see a more left-wing direction for Germany, and because of Germany's power, for Europe in general. All of that, though, after 6 months of coalition negotiations, just to figure out what they actually want and what they think is most important. But what do you think? Do you think that that's going to be the coalition? Or maybe some other view, some other alliance that I've not seen coming is actually going to be the one to change everything and take over? Here's some other people, and I'll chat to you all again very, very soon. Hello, it seems we're getting a few technical problems right now, but hopefully I'll get this sorted very, very soon. Hi there, and welcome back to The Happening. My name is George Shaft, and this has been quite the show today, hasn't it? I've talked about British politics, basically all of those happening. There's a return of the 2000s, including a little aside that snuck into the next section on dirty cops in the worst possible way. I also talked about the German elections and my speculations on what's going to happen next, and how each party performed and what I think about those. But now, let's go to something a bit less functional. In the United States, they have this very unique thing. It's called the debt ceiling. Basically, there's a rule that says, oh, the debts can only be so high, and we just kind of go gaga if it doesn't get, if it gets overcome. Now, in the past, the usual US solution has been to just vote to make the debt ceiling higher. But every once in a while, it doesn't work quite that way. If anybody has a long memory, you might remember the year 2014, when the debt ceiling actually did get run over by a little bit. And it was a big thing. It was called the government shutdown. Everybody wasn't being paid for about 2 weeks in the US, who was in sort of the US federal government employ. Not very great, as you can imagine. Well, this week, I've got CSNBC for this. House passes debt ceiling suspension that is doomed in the Senate. That is exactly the kind of story you want to read, right? The House on Wednesday passed a bill that would suspend the US debt ceiling, but Republicans will reject the legislation in the Senate, as they say they will not support a debt limit increase or suspension. Democrats are trying to prevent two potential crises this week: a possible government shutdown and a first ever US default. I cannot stress hard enough how catastrophic it would be if the United States defaulted on its debts. The US dollar is the currency that underpins world finance. The United States is the biggest sort of basically guarantor of, you might disagree or you might dislike it, but it is the biggest guarantor of peace and some kind of world order. And if it defaulted on its debts, there is nothing good that's going to happen from that. But it looks like that might happen. And the more sad part is it looks like it's going to be entirely without point. If this argument was happening in Britain or Russia or Germany or China, Algeria, Italy, it would not have mattered so much. Not at all. Because they don't have debt ceilings. Germany's got like a constitutional provision for, a budget that's a bit over much in debt, can't be sort of approved, yada, yada. But sane countries realize that governments need some leeway and some space to go in bit in debt to fund, the things that make a country work, like a military, police, social services, healthcare, the environment, all the 9 yards. But the US keeps on this insane ticking time bomb that is a constant source of, what if we wanted to have Armageddon? Here it is. And for years and years and years, repeatedly, just in my lifetime, and I'm not even all that old, the debt ceiling keeps coming up as, here comes Armageddon again. And this looks like, maybe for the first time, it's genuinely just going to be passed up and just genuinely be Armageddon for no reason. And we've got a government now running the most powerful country in the world that is best compared, unfortunately, not to a government in the 2000s, but to the Italian government of the 1920s before Mussolini came in charge, of just complete ineffectiveness and not being able to do anything. I silently scream at this one. Like, we genuinely just have this economic time bomb that looks like the US government is fully set to argue their way into making happen, which looks set now to just explode and cause world havoc on the world economy just after a pandemic that killed millions of people for no reason. So as you can see, I've been really sleeping very well this week. I've been really looking forward, as you can really tell, to the world economic system just exploding into meltdown, just as we'd finished sorting through the last crisis. Part of me almost wishes that maybe Angela Merkel should stay on. After all, her entire government would seem to be nothing but solving crises, and that's exactly what we need. Anyway, that's been me this week. This is going to be a bit shorter than normal, but I've got to go. The editor's got to go. He's got places to be. So I'll catch you just next week. And I hope to see you all again at Sunday at 12. And yeah, stay safe, have fun,